I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. As always, I invite you to support this program by telling everybody you know about it. Send a tweet, send a post to your Facebook or to your YouTube channel, to your networks, letting people know that Al McFarlane's on the air right now, and he's going to have an interesting conversation with a new best friend. Well, what I want you to do is like the show, share it, and become a subscriber. For background, we are streaming live to about 5 different platforms. 2 of them are YouTube channels. One is the Insight News channel. It's YouTube /Insight News, but the other is YouTube for Black Press USA, the Black Press of America. We're part of that. Insight News is a member of the National Association, the National Black Newspapers Association, National Newspaper Publishers Association. That's the correct name for it. And we also stream to their first Facebook channel, to our Facebook channel. We're streaming live to Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So no matter where you may be connecting, we want to connect with you. We want to connect with you. We thank you for connecting with us, and we invite you to share, participate, of course, like. Got a question or comment, you can join the conversation. Go to the comment section on either platform. We'll get your notice. We'd love to shout you out. Tell us who you are, your name first, last, or none, just whatever name you're using. Let us know where you're checking us out from. We want to shout you out. Well, today I have the pleasure of meeting, and I just described to him that he's my new best friend, and he's Jay Goede. Jay Goede is returning to a role that he first created 21 years ago at CTC, Children's Theater Company. And like much of the audience here in Twin Cities, he saw some of his very first theater at the Children's Theater Company when he was a child. He's gone on to do a lot of work on Broadway, the production of A Year with Frog and Toad, Angels in America, The Place of Thing, and Sex and Longing, a national tour with Cabaret, the roundabout version. He's also the voice of Mewtwo under the name Philip Bartlett in the film Mewtwo Strikes Back. He was also in the film Ethan Frame and 54. For television, you've seen him on Law and Order and Law and Order Criminal Intent. He's got a degree from the University of Minnesota, a BFA, and from Yale School of Drama, a master's degree. Jay, welcome. Good to meet you. Good to see you. Thank you for being here with me on the Conversation with Al McFarlane.
I'm super happy to be here. Thank you, Al. Very nice to be here.
Well, let's talk about you first of all, and then in the course of talking about you, talk about the work you're doing now at CTC. What's your own background? I've mentioned a little bit of it, but give me the real backstory on Jay.
We just had a chance to talk about it briefly there, but I grew up in Mound, Minnesota, which is on Lake Minnetonka, and I was lucky enough to come to see shows at the Children's Theater Company. That was my first introduction really to theater. The first time I ever saw theater was the Children's Theater production of Little Match Girl, which they used to do every few Christmases or so. They do things in rep at Christmas time. And it was amazing. And my parents were so thrilled that my brother and I were so captivated. I wanted to be one of those kids that was going to the Children's Theater School. They had an amazing school, but I was too shy. I was a painfully shy kid, and I was the kid looking out the window and daydreaming and drawing comic book characters. And so I thought I would end up being an artist, and that was my goal as a child, to be some kind of a commercial artist or illustrator. And things turned a different course when I was in college at the University of Minnesota. So I got
Tell me about that. How did you come to moving in the direction that you've gone into?
Yeah, I went to school as a double major. I went to the University of Minnesota, their fine art program. And I also started taking classes, which was I guess my intention was to become a theater set designer. That's really, once I started looking at theater, and not so much at the commercial art. and I started taking classes in set design. And the university has an amazing program, and they have grad students, and it was lots of students auditioning for plays. And kind of on a dare, I started auditioning for plays, and I started getting roles in the plays, and that really wasn't my focus. Although I think it was a great thing for me to kind of come out of myself a little bit. And the more shows I did in the university stages, the more I had two mentors at the theater school at the University of Minnesota, Barbara Reed and Stephen Caney. And they pulled me aside one day and they said, "You could do this for a living. We think we have a lot of faith in you. We want you to maybe go to grad school if you're willing to go down that road." And they were just amazing people. And it was kind of a whirlwind of things happening very quickly. And I became an actor. So who knew? Who knew sitting in Children's Theater was going to be it?
Well, tell me about the production you're doing at CTC.
I'm doing this amazing show that's been done, I think, if not twice, just once in rep since I did it. I came to the show in 2003. They were doing a production out of town, workshopping a new show, which they'd done a couple workshops in New York City. Willie and Rob Reale were writing the music. Bob Oyette was producing, so he's a pretty big producer, mostly of television shows, and hadn't done a lot of Broadway. But so I knew there were beautiful people working on it. Adrienne Lobel, the daughter of Arnold Lobel, was doing all the sets. It was a very heady group of people working on the show, and their hopes was to take it to Broadway. So I went. It was summer in Minneapolis, and my family's here, so I thought, of course, I'll audition for this. And it was one of those things I didn't put a lot of time into, just because I was very busy working on things that I thought were bigger deals. But it became this beautiful little blessing for me. I got to go home, I got to see my family, and I got to meet 4 other actors. It's a small show, about 5 actors total. It is 5 actors total. Brilliant, singers, dancers, actors that I'd seen on Broadway. And it became this beautiful, probably one of the best experiences I've ever had in theater, on stage and off. We eventually went to New York, and we eventually went off Broadway, then on Broadway. And it was one of those years that just was, you can't pray for that kind of stuff to happen. It was a magical time for me. A sweet show.
Give a synopsis of the show.
I don't know if you've read the Frog and Toad books, but they're kind of the first chapter books that children read often in school. And I guess you can compare them to The Odd Couple. Frog is a little bit of a head trip. He's really hard on himself, and he gets flustered very easily, and he's a little slower than Frog because he's a little rounder. And Frog is very controlled and very organized and very relaxed, and has things done his way. But they're perfect for each other. They're two misfits that fit together, and they support each other, and they love each other despite their flaws. And very much like The Odd Couple or Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street, they have their differences. But the beautiful thing about the show is it's about friendship. It's about loyalty, friendship, and finding the good in each other. And that one friend that we hope we all have, that, at the end of our days, we can say that was my best friend.
And so what's it like for you to have created the role 21 years ago and to come back to it now? What's the feeling?
That's a good question.
What lessons did you learn or deliver 21 years ago? And with the value of experience over the past 2 decades, what is different, if anything?
We're just about to begin rehearsals. So I wish I could lie and say we're in rehearsals, but I have no idea what this is going to be. I know that I'm 20 years older. I was 40 when we did the show. I'm 60 now. And they asked me to do, Peter was lovely, and he said, "I hear you're back in town for a while. Do you have any interest in revisiting Frog?" And that never happens for actors. It's rare that we get to go back and do a play again, and to do a part that was so special for us. So they asked me to come back. I was here in the cities, and I said I'd be thrilled. And who knows if I can even move on the stage, let alone jump and dance like a frog. But it's exciting, and I'm treating it as a new experience. I'm sure that it'll spill out, but I'm trying to think it's a new group of actors. Peter's a new director for me. I've always wanted to work with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thrilled to be here. And it'll be a new magical experience, I hope.
Well, the production is A Year with Frog and Toad. It's running from April 23rd to June 16th. It's a show for all ages, and you can sort of plan to get your tickets now. Something you don't want to miss. I have not seen it, but I will see it. It sounds exciting, and having meeting you today, that means it's extra special to me.
Oh,
I'll be excited to see what you deliver. But let me ask you to think back of what your experience was 2 decades ago when you embarked on this story. What were your expectations and what were your discoveries?
Well, I was trained basically at Yale as a classical actor. I did a lot of the classics and a lot of Shakespeare. I sung a few times in shows, and I grew up. My parents were both music teachers, and I grew up listening to music and Rodgers and Hammerstein score. But I wouldn't call myself a musical performer. I was an actor who sang. So
Mm-hmm.
the most vivid memory about this show is that I learned how to sing by doing it every day. So it was one of those magical things where I found my voice as a singer. I'd had voice lessons before, and at Yale we had a voice teacher, a singing teacher. But I really learned, partly because I was working with such Broadway voices, these beautiful actors, singers. But I learned how to sing instead. So it's a beautiful musical, let alone the fact that it's a very sweet show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's got a delicate balance of, I wouldn't say fragile. There's a sweetness and an intelligence about it that you have to kind of not push. It's very kind of subtle, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
very very excited to be a part of that again. The script
And
itself.
so that sweetness and subtleness, is it due to the storyline, the script, the directing? What are the elements that go into making it so unique and special to you?
Well, first of all, just even in the treatment of the set and costumes, they're very loyal to the they're dressed as humans. I mean, people, I tell them I'm performing as a frog, and they, oh, a big costume, a green costume, and of course I'm in green and Toad is in brown. But they said it kind of at the turn of the century, in the sense that we look a little bit like we're doing vaudeville.
Mm.
So there's a charm about the costumes. Marty Pakladitis, who's no longer with us, but did a beautiful job on the costumes. Very detailed, very subtle, and definitely I'm a frog from far away. But it's done with such um, intelligence and sophistication and care. And the set is, they're very loyal to the books.
Hmm.
Arnold Lobel did the illustrations as well, and his daughter, who's a brilliant designer, brilliant artist, fine artist as well, and she did these beautiful renderings that became beautiful sets. And yeah, it's a gorgeous show.
And
So
so, what did you feel walking into the role? How did you sort of prepare yourself to, be a human but a frog at the same time, to convey, the
I just,
idea
yeah,
that you wanted to convey, giving sort of a human quality to the spirit of the frog or the
yep,
idea of the character of the frog? What's that involve?
that's a great question. Well, in looking at the animal itself, it can be very still and
Hmm.
very calm, and then there's a leap, and then there's a steadiness about it, and it's a solid feeling. So that gave me some kind of grace and some kind of rhythm for him. Of course, there's a couple of moments very chosen carefully where I jump in the air, but we don't do that. It's very much, we're Bob Hope and we're Bing Crosby in
Uh,
a good way. I mean, there's a very light quality about that's kind of what I compare it to as far as the vaudeville aspect of it. Um, but I think it was the physical first. I always kind of try to find something physical, and kind of the voice,
mhm.
calm, kind of steady voice. I'm singing mostly as a baritone in the show. I've got a beautiful ballad I get to sing about being a frog. Um, my character likes to be alone once in a while, just to calm down and center himself. He's very zen, and or he tries to be. He's probably a little more uptight than Toad at moments, but so it's finding that, and then finding the rhythm compared to the actor playing Toad. And there's a whole new actor that I get to play the role with. I did it originally with Mark Lynn Baker, who's a brilliant comedian and physically and just hysterical. And he did a beautiful job as Toad, and I get to do it with a whole new actor,
How do
singing.
you know when you strike, when you hit the
Yeah,
home run in a production and a performance? And uh, when you did this show 21 years ago, do you remember what the highlights of the delivery were? Did you walk away
Yes.
some nights saying, "Oh, I killed it"?
We just had so much fun playing on stage. There's a number in the show called Toad Looks Funny in a Bathing Suit is the number, because Toad is not a great swimmer and he's got this kind of turn of the century big striped bathing suit on. He's fatter than everybody else and he's embarrassed, and they all kind of giggle at him because he does look funny in a bathing suit. And
Mm-hmm.
we've got bathing caps on, but it's just so much fun where it comes in the show fairly early. It's kind of where the audience starts to connect to the two characters, and they get that they're able to laugh at themselves and poke fun at each other without being cruel. And it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the play. And it's really fun to perform. So it's early enough in the show that you're not dying of flop sweat. And we start the show really with all the clothes, pretty much all the clothes we're going to wear in the show, excluding a couple jackets on underneath our pajamas as the show starts. We start at spring is opening. So it's just kind of this little race that happens, and you don't have time to really take in how quickly it's going. But it's a joy. It really plays itself. It's about an hour and 20, I think, without the intermissions.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't wait to do it again. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it's my favorite number to show. Get loaded to.
So listen, Jay, I absolutely love talking to artists and creative people, and because I feel like I'm sort of expressing my own frustration at not being one, but thankful for the opportunity to talk to you and people who create, who act, who perform like you do. I have just a great admiration for both courage and ability, and for what I perceive. I do call myself a great audience member. I take pride in being.
Well, that's a big thing.
It is a big
They're
thing.
not all great.
Yeah, and I take pride. I take pride in really wanting to understand and feel and know and get all the things that are in front of me as a performance unfolds in plays and also in music and concert performances. I love it, and what I love most is sort of trying to use my own measure and memory of being able to note the moment, what I call the moment of transformation in a production. Because what happens is that everybody gets lost into the moment at a certain time, and the room changes. So, I was at a concert. One of my favorite jazz musicians was and is Sun Ra. I don't know if you knew him at all, but he called himself an intergalactic traveler, and he had the Sun Ra Orchestra, Arkestra, and his musicians were people that he said he assembled when he arrived here from Saturn. And he also said that he had been fortunate and kind of, I guess, described himself as an actor, because he said, all those children that I met, they thought I was a 5-year-old like them.
Yeah.
And I fooled them for 12 years.
Well, that's the great thing about it. I think, many actors are, childlike, if not childish at times. And that, you hit it on the head there. It's, going from basically not family-oriented shows to my first really family show, Frog and Toad, or, not family, just everybody show, and having my younger members of the audience. You really do get the most honesty from them. They'll tell you if something's funny or if it's not. They're incredibly boisterous when they think something's funny, but they're critics too, and they'll tell you you'll feel that it's not funny. It's a more pure audience member sometimes, and they're enjoying it with their parents, and they're asking questions, and it's like there's like nothing else, doing a show for such an inclusive group of people.
Well, so when I interviewed Sun Ra after his performance there at Children's Theater, and the band rented the hall for the night, and big crowd, sold out crowd. It was like actually Halloween weekend, I believe, that year. And I kind of arrived a little bit late, and what they were playing was a song called Halloween in Harlem. And it was everything that the name implied, both delightful, fanciful and
Mm.
scary, but
Yeah.
interesting. And
Yeah.
so after the show, when I interviewed him, I said, what were you doing up there? He said, well, number one, I was connecting with everybody in the room. And he said, I feel it when one person walks in and one person leaves. Each person's presence is a part of the alchemy that is unfolding during a performance. So I use that as my measure as well.
That's
And
beautiful to say.
I'm wondering, I asked my artist friends like you, Jay, uh, what happens on stage and in you? Do you feel moments of transformation? And how does it feel?
Definitely.
How do you describe it?
Well, it's the thing you always live for as an actor. And there are shows you can do at a complete show sometimes 3 hours long, and it never happens.
Ah,
That's rare. You hope it's going to happen, at least moments in the show.
sure.
But it's the thing you hope for. And there are a million things that help you get there. Not just having a trained voice and being relaxed and having beautiful actors around you, hopefully, or good actors. But it's the point of transformation where the whole audience surrenders to that moment, and
Mm,
you kind of you realize you're part of something bigger than you, and it's the thing you don't feel doing television or films, and it's the joy of being an actor. It really is. And I think that's why I responded as a young actor to Shakespeare so much, because it's musical, it's poetry,
mhm.
and it's universal. Even if you don't get it all, there's moments of transformation and bliss and grace. Doing Angels in America on Broadway, it was a beautiful play written by Tony Kushner, also a poet, among other things, a brilliant man. And there were moments in the show that you could feel the audience leaning forward, and as a whole. And
Mhm.
it's interesting what you said about performing to everybody. I had a great voice teacher at Yale who said it's not about projecting your voice, it's about talking to that person up in the second balcony
Mm,
and just thinking about getting it to them up there.
mhm,
Just the thought of
mhm,
conveying to like all those different people. And
mhm.
you do kind of make little relationships with each other. And you're very aware when some of them are not enjoying the show. Because you do, we're not the most stable sometimes of people as far as our feelings. I'm speaking for a lot of actors. I'll speak for myself. We're sensitive souls, and I'm definitely guilty of focusing on the one person who doesn't seem to be enjoying the show sometimes. It can
Mm,
drive me mad when
mhm,
everybody else is. So it's part of the beast, but it's also the great gift of the year that you get to experience something that's never going to happen again.
mhm,
The show will never be like that again.
mhm, mhm.
But yeah, this great moment.
What was the world like when you were 5 years old? What when you were five, 3, 4, 5, and becoming aware of your personhood,
Yeah, that's a great
that you
question.
were an individual in the world, in your family, your neighborhood, your house, etc. How did
Yeah,
the world look to you? And I asked the question to get a sense of what a lifetime of work
yeah,
has has given you in terms of
yeah,
perspective, knowledge, capability, hope, or disgust.
yeah,
Because you could be angry that
yeah.
that
I
stuff
was
is
very
messed
much.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think I wouldn't be here without theater or being an actor. But I think the exact opposite was true. I was a kid who was in the corner of the fireplace at the end of the living room, kind of stuck over there drawing. And I think that's where my parents were kind enough to save my drawing since I was 2 or 3 years old. And there's a folder of all this stuff. I was obsessed. I think it was a way to escape. I didn't have the happiest childhood at times, but there was a lot of joy in creating. And that fantasy land that was the fantasy life. I had a very strong fantasy life. I was very interested in Walt Disney films as a young child, and then comic books, and just getting out of myself. Like I said, I was a kid looking out the window. So at 5 years old, I was very, very shy, painfully shy. A little bit, I know we're all kind of, I guess you could say we're all on the spectrum of social awareness, but
Sure.
I was very introverted. And so I spent years like that, really, just being kind of a good student. I had a teacher pull me aside in third grade, and she said, "Jay, I need to speak to you before we go to lunch." Well, I was terrified because I thought she did. First of all, she saw me, so she noticed me. That was embarrassing, and
Mhm.
she needed to talk to me, so I must be in trouble. She pulled me into her office and said, "Jay, sit down." And she was my favorite teacher. She's another one who saved all my drawings. And she said, "Jay, I have to tell you something." I was sweating by this point. She said, you don't always have to be a good boy, Jay.
Uh,
And I was busted for being a good boy. That's how my little head worked. I was so uptight. And she said, you can have fun sometimes. So
mm,
that was a moment where I was
wow.
like, I just kind of snapped into maybe everyone's reality, but certainly hers. And she was trying to tell me to just have more fun.
Mhm,
And I think my head was so inside of my escape was very much here,
mhm,
not so much out here. And I didn't connect to people really well. Very shy. So
mhm,
I was one of those kids that kind of slithered along the hallways, kind of trying to get out of school quickly so that no one saw me.
mhm,
Um, very, very, very pulled in. And again, I went into theater. Who knew that would be the great gift of coming out of myself? And I think it kept me alive for a while
mhm.
because I was very much one of those people that didn't know how to deal with my feelings, but I got to have someone else's feeling for 2 hours on stage and then go back home to being a little turtle or hermit or whatever I was.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
I'm grateful for the childhood I had
mhm,
because it created a very sensitive actor.
mhm.
And I'm grateful that I got to paint and draw and do all those things. And my parents have encouraged that. I was raised by two incredibly kind people, who taught me how to be a decent person and to be generous and kind to others. And I was so grateful for that. So
So in your being raised to be a decent human being, how did the world look to you outside of yourself and outside of your family, even outside of your school?
yeah,
What's the relationship between you and world events or city events or social events in the world? Do you mark parts of your life, career by events, either great or tragic? I remember where I was, Jay, home that day when JFK was killed. I was
mm.
homesick from school, watching
Oh
TV
wow, yeah,
at our family living room in Kansas City, Missouri, where I was born and where I'm from. But that event was a signature event. I remember uh, where I was during the March on Washington with Dr. Martin Luther King, and I was hospitalized getting some knee surgery.
oh,
Uh, and I just remember longing, watching, but longing, uh, wishing that I could have been there because I sensed the
mm,
impact and the power of the moment, and I sensed the power of the moment on me,
yeah,
and I wanted that to be in me and of me as well, that I
sure,
should be there, that I should be there. So that's kind of how I look at a lot of things. Those are big picture things, but they're small picture things too that
yeah.
demark elements of my growing and becoming the Al McFarlane that I am today. What was it like for you? What are the big things that shaped you that made you know that I've made some movement here or I'm making
Yeah,
movement?
like I said, because I came from kind of this place of being pulled into the world, and I had a lot of fear about the world. I was a very fearful child in a lot of
Mhm,
ways for a while.
mhm,
So there were big moments. I certainly remember, as an adult, you were talking about big moments. A young actor in New York City when 9/11 happened. That's
mm.
one of those moments that
Yeah, yeah,
you were in
absolutely.
the middle of it, living in Manhattan. And I'll never forget those days and the days after. But as a young child, it's
Well, talk,
interesting.
talk, talk, talk about that first of all. That came up. I'd be glad to hear what happened, with you and in you, 9/11.
What's the thing the nightmares are made of? You have end of the world dreams, or I've had many, and especially if I was a kid who had a lot of fear. It was come true. And I woke up to the second building falling, and my dog was barking to go outside. I slept late. I think I'd been up at a party or something the night before, and I walked outside, and there were people almost running up the street with ash on their face. I lived in Midtown, 34th, um, near the UN,
Mm-hmm.
and you thought this isn't real. This couldn't be happening. And it was an out of the body experience. It was terror. It was sheer terror. And people looked lost, and there were people all over the streets. And it's the kind of thing you hope you never see again. And then the feelings afterwards as they were looking for people that were missing and seeing their faces on the subway. Um, it was just, it was hard. It was really hard. And I was grateful to be part of it in the end. But those are moments you hope you never have to experience again either, or everybody else has to experience.
Mm-hmm. I was actually doing a version of this program the morning of 9/11. We used to do this show. We used to call it the Insight KMOJ Public Policy Forum weekly, and we did it as a live broadcast on both KFAI radio and on KMOJ. And I think we did it mornings, like at 9 o'clock or something like that.
Mhm.
And on the way from my house to the restaurant where we did the show was in a restaurant here in North Minneapolis called Lucille's Kitchen. Lucille's Kitchen was a classic neighborhood diner joint,
Yeah.
but it was a wonderful place because everybody showed up
Yeah.
every day, but particularly on the days I did the live broadcast from there. And I remember we had actor, you might know of him, Roger Gunvir, a guy that played Huey Newton, and he played in Spike Lee's movies.
Sure.
The bus about the March on Washington and other
Yeah.
roles.
Yeah.
But he was actually my guest for the program. And back in those days, we had a live band. My brother's a musician, so Wayne McFarlane and the ipso facto crowd, reggae musicians, provided live music to open and accent the show from guest to guest.
Yeah.
And I remember the first tower had been struck. And while we were doing the show, the television in the restaurant was turned on mute. But all of us there were talking and then watching as the second plane plowed into the tower. And it was just unbelievable. It was painful, and because the feeling you had is, what's next? What does this mean? And what should we be doing? Do we need to do something? Because is this the beginning of something bigger? Is this the beginning of the end? That's kind of how it felt. And we were sitting there in a room, together watching TV, but also having a conversation. I remember that Gunvir got up and started jamming with Wayne. And I think they were singing a Bob Marley song as the show closed out. And I can't remember the song right now, but it was right on time. It was like the right song for that space and for that moment. And it was like the spirit kind of guided that expression, and everybody kind of was connected not only to the conversation we were having about his production in town that he was doing, but also what was unfolding in New York at the time, and consequently what was unfolding in the world. And so it connected us to that. That was a big moment.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you hope the negative things are, like you're talking about President Kennedy's death there, it's powerful as anything, maybe even more so than joyous moments, because they hit you in such a deep way, fearful way. Yeah. That's my biggest memory as an adult, and as a child. I'm trying to think. I certainly remember when Ronald Reagan was shot. Or was shot at. That was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
And I remember Watergate. Those are big things that I visually, as far as world stuff going on in there. Seeing the Watergate trials and being about third grade, trying to understand what that was about it. Watergate Hotel. And so those are big history things for me. Certainly there's been things since then that have been, as an adult, devastating. Not as devastating as 9/11, but we live in a fearful time sometimes, and it's very easy to go spinning down that rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and all the other stuff that we can be afraid of.
Sure.
But I try to live in hope, and I try not to live in fear. I learned really late in life to kind of get out of myself.
Well, you anticipated my question and the direction of the conversation, and that is, how then do we come to maintain and nurture a hope, a sense of hope that can transport us beyond the crises of the moment. It means that we're not seeing all that is wrong in the world, but somehow, despite that, we see what is and can be right in our personal lives and in the world, and with human beings, and with the planet, and with the environment. How's that shape? That sounds like the kind of guy you are. Am I hitting it a little bit or not?
Well, I think that's true. Like I said, I came from a fearful person to become a person hopefully of faith. I try to live in faith more often than fear, and that's a learned behavior when you're someone who comes from a lot of fear. But I think life is about connection, and I think we die without water and connection. I think if we don't connect, we literally drop to the floor in agony and physical, almost the pain in the end. But I do think that if we don't connect, we're doomed as human beings, human race. And I think that's a little of what's going on as the world gets more, not just technology. The world gets smaller, but we get farther away from each other emotionally. And I think we don't take care of each other as nations. I think that was the whole point of the United Nations and there's a lot of fear in the world. And I think as we get farther away from grace or some kind of spiritual understanding of each other, at least the desire to understand each other, it gets more difficult. So I don't mean to sound pessimistic about it, but I do think there's a personal responsibility to connection. And if it's just somebody on the street, the person at the corner store that you see every day, that's really all we can do. Hopefully it's larger than ourselves and not just the corner store, but I think we'll die without that. And I think as the world gets more turbulent, we feel disconnected.
I'm Al McFarlane. You're listening to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest is Jay Goede. He stars as Frog in the upcoming production at Children's Theater Company. The production is A Year with Frog and Toad. It's a role he played, opened at CTC, Children's Theater Company, 21 years ago. And it's opening again here April 23rd, running through June 16th at Children's Theater Company in South Minneapolis. It's a show that you don't want to miss. I'm having a wonderful time talking with Jay. I'm going to come back and talk some more after this message. Are you or someone you know recovering financially from the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown, or any other reason? If so, help is available. Findhelp.org is a site to find a wide range of resources, including food, medical care, and more. The best part is based on your zip code. Visit findhelp.org, enter your zip code and the service you need. You'll get a map directing you to the organizations that can help you. Help is waiting at findhelp.org. If you need help starting anew, findhelp.org is the site for you. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm talking with my new best friend, Jay Goede. He's acting, leading in a small cast, but a major role at a production at Children's Theater Company, CTC. The show opens April 23rd, runs through June 16th. It's A Year with Frog and Toad. And interestingly, it's a production that Jay opened 21 years ago at CTC. Here he is back again doing the same show. Before I ask my next question, a note from our producer, just to remind listeners that 83% of our viewers on YouTube are not subscribed. And I want to take a minute, a moment of personal privilege, and invite you, if you're connecting on YouTube, to subscribe to our channel. We have across, I think, 600 or so subscribers. We want to get to 1,000, and your subscription is one person closer to that goal. Go to YouTube, Insight News MN, subscribe, like, and share. Tell everybody you know to check us out. We have a lot of fun. I call these robust conversations. And I told Jay before we started, I said, my job, Jay, is just to be, number one, a good listener and a curious guy. I'm a reporter by training. Jay, I think I told you, maybe I used to work for the Pioneer Press as a reporter, and I've been an owner of a community newspaper for 50 years now, 50 years in the business. And I love what I do. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I love language. I love words. I love the creativity and I love the power of language, the power of speech. I mean, I'm absolutely blown away when I, number one, listen and hear and see, speech, words, thoughts, sounds that have meaning, that give meaning,
Mhm.
that are associated with meaning making. And I'm flabbergasted by the power we have as human beings to shape, to contain, to form the world, to assemble the world in ways that we can share and both support and challenge each other at the same time, challenge both the past and co-create the future. Words are the key, language is the key from my point of view, and the highest expression of that is the expression of the artists like Jay Goede and the poets and the singers who live in a place of purity, I think. Uh, Sometimes the purity is ugly, but it's pure, right?
Yeah.
It's human. It's human.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
human, and it contains the range of our possibilities and more. So that's why I love doing the show, and that's why I'm loving this conversation as well.
Beautifully
Jay,
said.
talk about before I want to make sure that we keep telling people about the show so they can get tickets and go and
Yes.
support this phenomenal treasure that we have in Children's Theater Company and this production in particular. But I want to learn more about the kinds of roles you've done in your professional career. I mentioned some of those in the bio, but talk about the trail of your acting and working in theater and in film and TV.
Yeah, I think, that was always the big dilemma for me. I was a theater actor. I think that was a theater animal that felt most comfortable on a stage. My agents, as I got out of drama school, I had a wonderful agent. She used to say, Jay, if you just stay in town, you might get a movie or two. Because there was, when you come out of drama school, everybody wants to see if you're any good. So you get a lot of auditions when you come out, if you're lucky. And I was one of those people who kept going out of town to play Romeo or do, a part in Othello, or I just couldn't stay in one place. I had to go do Shakespeare. And it was about language. And I think that's why I responded so strongly to Shakespeare in particular, and the musicality of it, but also he was a genius, and it does connect us. He's a perfect example for me, someone I enjoyed and did a lot of Shakespeare over the years. It's where I learned how to act, to really be a good actor.
Mm.
I got to do the Scottish play, as they call it, Macbeth, when I was a second year student at Yale, and I had that moment where I'm like, this is what it is.
Mm.
I knew I was an okay actor, but I didn't know until like doing Shakespeare and doing that role, a person very much like myself, in his head, living in his head, trying to figure it all out. And he loses his wife, he loses everything
Mhm.
because he's living in his head. He's not connecting, among his other demons,
Mhm.
which gets dark. And I think that whole play is about two people probably madly in love with each other, passionate people that aren't able to create a child.
Mm.
And the play becomes more corrupt and dark as they disconnect from each other. And eventually he's talking to himself, and someone comes in and said, your wife, my lord, is dead.
Hmm.
And he has to back to the world, and she's gone. And the rest of the play just spirals into darkness. And that's kind of where I thought, oh, it's connection. It's connection again. And it was, the great gift of Shakespeare for me was I learned, you know, American realism was a different kind of animal, more like me and easier, maybe on some level to do. But I had such a great time doing Shakespeare, and I thought that was kind of the thing I was really good at.
Mhm.
So then you get to a television audition. I was one of those people who there are actors who walk into a room who were maybe the star football player or the cheerleader in high school, and maybe the homecoming king or queen, and they were very popular and they had a strong sense of themselves. I speak generally about actors,
Mhm.
but they were winners. And there were people like me who were the nerds, and they used to call them the burnouts, the people smoking cigarettes behind the building, and who felt the misfits. I was one of
Mhm.
those, and who were shy.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that's certainly why I became an actor, to get out of myself. But I was never good at going into a room and selling myself. I wasn't confident that way. And I really only felt safe and comfortable on a stage or in front of a camera sometimes. But I couldn't find the joy as an actor really in film and television. It's a very tedious process. it's a lot of standing around and waiting. I felt alive being an actor, and probably because there was such an addiction to the emotional aspect of being an actor on stage. So I never regretted it. I think it did damage to my career on some level as far as my commercial opportunities. It was a different time in the 90s. And for someone who was starting to get therapy and kind of, not to get too zen on this whole conversation, but to get out of myself and to connect, the happier I got, the less I was happy as an actor. I realized it maybe wasn't the best thing for me. I chose it out of a need to probably connect to people, but it also became a kind of shallow way to kind of find those connections on some level because they weren't mine. And the happier I became as a person, the less I kind of needed it. And so I kind of started to gear away from it and took a break from it for many years. I have great, coming back to it, I have great respect and I have a lot more kind of wisdom about it. And it's not about the emotions and the neuroses and me. So I think that's the great thing about coming back to the show. I haven't really acted because I went into teaching and then my artwork after that. I haven't really acted really since 2010, where I was on stage a lot. And so I'm so excited to be back on the stage. It was a thing I didn't think I'd do for a while. I missed it and I kind of mourned it, being an actor. I knew it was the right thing for me to do at the time to step away from it. But the happier I got, the less I needed it. And now it's just a gift to go back into. And I hope I'm somewhat good again at it. So yeah, you said about language. I think that's the thing for me too. I found such freedom in the rhythms of Shakespeare, the iambic pentameter. It was like music. And I think because I was basically a musical person raised in a musical home, I understood that. So, and I get to do this little musical again. So,
well, do you describe yourself or feel that you have the music in your body and in your mind? When you walk around, are you feeling Shakespeare? Are you thinking and applying the storylines, the poetry, and the analyses, right, of Shakespearean thought to what you're seeing around you?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Is the music in your body as you walk?
I think that's why it was a thing for me. Is iambic pentameter is the dum ba dum ba dum ba dum, and you find that in the rhythm, and you ride it like the waves. If you're doing it right, and that's the thing the audience also feels, the rhythm of us breathing together, heartbeats, and that's in the language. And so I think that's why I responded. It's the same thing when you find the kind of grace in a song or your version of the song, you connect to the music, and we all have different connections to different kind of music, but that's where it kind of worked for me. And that's why, doing Frog and Toad, I'd sung before in performances, various musicals, but I didn't really understand how to do that thing I did with Shakespeare in a musical, getting the nerves out of the way. So I'm so excited to get to have that feeling again. To the five of us connect musically, and of course, the drama of the show and the fun of the show. But we get to do our little numbers. We each have a number where we get to do, that Shakespeare monologue or whatever you want to call it.
Well, let me put you on the spot, and you can always tell me, no, Al, I'm not doing this, but I'd love to. You got me so intrigued now about your relationship with Shakespeare. So I'm going to ask you if you have something that you'd want to share or do out of your memory that reflects Jay Goede and his relationship with Shakespeare.
I'm going to get all emotional now. I have so many. That was a powerful question. I think Hamlet, when I did Hamlet, that is just such a beautiful play, and I identified as a young actor playing Hamlet. It's one of those roles that, regardless of the success of the production, the play kind of got a good actor playing Hamlet. That's where the audience leans forward and they get to have all those beautiful monologues they hear, to be or not to be, that it's a question. There's a beautiful speech at the end. Hamlet finds some grace for someone who starts off going, my father's ghost is visiting me and I don't know what this world is about, and I'm in agony and I can't love a girl, and because I'm too self-involved and I'm angry, among other feelings he feels. He has some through tragedy, he understands that life is temporary.
Mm.
And he, beautiful speech at the end where he says, "There's a divine providence in the fall of a sparrow." Oh, sorry. "If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. Since man knows aught of what he leaves behind, what is it to leave but times? Let be." That's a great gift. Life is all about, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can't worry about the past.
Mhm.
We live in the present.
Mhm.
You have to let it be.
Let it be. Wow. Awesome.
Sorry. I've done that speech in years, and it's interesting to
Well, you got me,
remember it.
brother Jay. You got me with it. Okay, I'm feeling it.
It's a power, and that's where Shakespeare just works for you, because you see immediately this beauty and this genius. And for someone who couldn't understand and couldn't live in his body and couldn't live in the moment, he gets this beautiful moment of grace where there's a melancholy about it, but he understands that it's temporary. And we can't live there. We can't live there. It's a sparrow dropping to the ground. Let it be.
What do we owe children? What does art owe children? I want to focus the last few minutes on the massive and important work of children's theater. And as you reflect on the role you're about to do and your work as an artist, as a actor and singer, poet, and you said you're a painter. Well, you're a painter as well. You're painting.
Some of my paintings are on
Is that your work behind you, or is that something?
You can see it. I don't even know how to work this camera. But there's some behind me, yes.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Thank you. It's hard to see. But yeah, I went to school originally for art, as I said. I love drawing humans. I mean, I'll do pets and animals as well, but I connect to the eyes and the spirit and souls of people, and I hope that comes through in the painting. So I love drawing portraits. That's mostly what I do. But I think that we owe children. It's a great question. I think they're so disconnected now. I think we live in our phones and we live in our heads again. And I think this new generation is a very difficult time connecting to each other in the world. And I think part of that, they say, started with COVID, where children were separated and not socialized in the way, maybe for very important years where you need to be socialized. And I'm speaking generally, but I think we're in a very precarious place. I mean, of course, as a planet, but also as people. And I think the children are really vulnerable to not have what we've all generations before been lucky enough to have, which is connection, and which is hopefully, as turbulent as the world can be, some joy. I think the world has gotten less joyful, and I think whether it's something silly, like in Frog and Toad, kind of lives on a lighter note and a joyful note, and there's certain little tragic moments in it, but I think humor is a big part of it. Connection, of course, and getting outside of ourselves. I don't know how to say it specifically, but we have to connect with each other. We're doomed. Brene Brown says this beautiful speech about, we die without connection. And I think that's the best thing about a theater experience is you go sit in a room full of 200, 300,000 people, and you get to have, like you said, that moment of grace, or those many moments of grace. And you experience this thing that's very temporary, but never to be created again in that way. And then you go home, and hopefully you remember that and start to connect again. I think it's very important for children. I don't think a lot of families now go to the theater necessarily. So yeah, it's the same thing with everybody sing together. When there's a song everybody knows, whether it's a national anthem or a children's song. I think those are moments that are rare, more rare now. So more than ever, we need theater and we need connection. So.
What's going to be the impact of technology on art, on theater, and on the future from your point of view? What do you fear, if anything, maybe nothing? What do you hope for? Because you talked about being disconnected and the technology enables individuals to go inside and to not be connected to those immediately and physically around them, but to be connected differently. What does that tell for the future?
I think it has to get really dark before it gets better. And I hope we live in a place where that's possible still. I don't want to live in negativity and doom and gloom. And you say, AI terrifies me. Artificial intelligence. Just as an artist, you see them create these beautiful portraits of people that, I mean, I look at that stuff and I think, these are computers creating this. And that's terrifying. And then, you see things in the paper or online about artificial intelligence robots getting a little too control happy. And they'll say these diabolical things where we could take away the world from you if we wanted to, and they don't even realize how the robot got to that. So we've kind of created a monster, but I do think there's hope in the fact that we're going to eventually have to kind of all help each other. And let's hope it's not when the end of the world comes. I have
a 9-year-old. Well,
What's that?
It's a great question. Great comment. I have a 9-year-old grandson, and I asked him about AI, and I kind of sounded like you. I think we have to be cautious. Be thoughtful. We want change and we want progress. We want to advance technology, but we have to also be mindful of laying our own death in front of us, right? As a species, right? And he says, "Oh no, AI is not a problem. This is a 9-year-old. It's just something that we can use." And so I'm amazed at his 9-year-old confidence and fearlessness. I hope
he doesn't see the doom of it. He sees the kind of, we can make this happen. We can make it work. Let's hope for that. He's running the show. I think the kids have inherited kind of a bad deal sometimes. I think generations before, we've kind of given them a very difficult problem to solve. But I think it's only be solved if we all help each other, because the world gets smaller. It gets more, treacherous. And I think in the end, we're going to have to help each other, whether it's a bomb going off, God forbid, or an earthquake or something bigger than that. That's and in the end, what happens? People come to each other. They try to help each other. I think it's human nature. See man suffering, you try to help them, whether it's in a car accident or getting across the street. So I hope that continues. I hope so, and I think people are basically hopeful.
I agree. I agree with you. Let me.
I would like to believe that. So
let's leave the conversation on that note. I want to remind people that you're starring in the CTC Children's Theater Company production of A Year with Frog and Toad. The production runs April 23rd, so they're in rehearsal right now, through June 16th. It's a small audience and a big message, a big show. I have not seen it. But because of this wonderful conversation with my new best friend, Jay Goede, I plan to see it. Jay, I plan to meet you. And
I hope so. Please come.
And check you out, man. This has been a great conversation. I thank you so much. I have both respect and love for who you are and what you do. And I think it's important. It's important. And hats off
same to you, Al. I love the questions and the way you think, and I think there's a lot of joy in the way you think and hope, and that's really nice to have a conversation with someone like that.
Well, listen, we'll be kicking it with you a little later on. Thank you so much, Jay.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right, I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.